Okay, good evening. It is 7:33 and we'd like to open up our meeting. It is September 12th. These two large doors are not true exits, so if there's an emergency, please do not use them. There's an exit which you probably came in the back. There's also an exit behind David Bourbon. There's also an exit, I understand, going down these stairs, but these two large openings are not at all exits, so please don't use them. Okay, and that's because the church is undergoing a lot of construction and it's dangerous to go out those doors. All right, we will begin with public comments for items not on the agenda. As we state in the agenda, there's 3 minutes per person unless there's a lot of people with comments. And we will limit this to 20 minutes, and Vice President Desai is going to be the 20-minute clock. And I have the 3-minute clock here, so go ahead. Please come up to the podium, yes.
Hello? I could give myself a chance to catch my breath because I get nervous. So my name is Douglas Gosselin. Oh, I'm speaking this. My name is Douglas Gosselin. I'm a Kensington resident. I've lived in Kensington since 1997 for 22 years. My wife and I moved to Kensington for the peacefulness of the neighborhood, the beauty, the neighbors, and we live right across the street from East Bay Mud and on Berkeley Park Boulevard. And East Bay Mud has recently, or has been in the process of doing an upgrade project. And that upgrade project has reached a point where it's getting more and more destructive. They have removed 250 trees so far. They continue to remove trees, brush, greenery. They're destructive, they're loud, they're messy, they are not good neighbors. They have more or less, we all have nice gardens. They don't keep up their garden, they just destroy and don't replace. And they have no oversight. I've learned, my neighbors and I have been protesting some of the things because 3 trees have been, we saved 3 trees out of 20 trees that they wanted to remove. We saved 3 big pine trees, so if you go down there, even though everything else has been raised by that building on Berkeley Park, the neighbors and I preserved 3 nice, big, beautiful pine trees. And that's about it. And what we learned is East Bay Mud has no oversight. Nobody is monitoring what they're doing. They have an environmental exemption. So like when I added 30 square feet onto the back of my house, I had to go through a whole process with this board, with the county, with making special plans. People had public give input. Nobody's giving input to East Bay Mud. They just do what they want. And then we don't have comment on it. And I'm forming a group with neighbors. I already have about 30 neighbors. I'm forming a Facebook page. And I'm asking the community to start giving oversight, to start giving your opinion, to say there's legal things that they have to do, but there's also ethical things they have to do. There's neighborly things that they have to do for our community. Because our community is peaceful, it's quiet, it's beautiful, and they're ruining that. They're not good neighbors. And I'm asking this Kensington board is, can you give some oversight to them? Can you give oversight to this company that is really causing some havoc on that Berkeley Park Boulevard in Coventry? And they're going to be causing more havoc. They have 7,000 truckloads of excavation that they're going to do over the next couple of years that are going to go up Berkeley Park Boulevard and through the Calusa entrance. 7,000, these are 18-wheeler truckloads. Can Kensington's infrastructure handle that kind of big trucks going up and down Berkeley Park Boulevard with the people that walk in it, the dog walkers?
3 minutes.
It's 3 minutes already? Okay. So if you have comments, I'm forming a group to say, I'm forming a group, I'll leave my information here. Contact East Bay Mud, contact PG&E, contact me. I'm forming a Facebook page.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Hello. My name is John Tassioni, and I'm going to read a letter addressed to the board directors. The letter is co-written by 94 Kensington neighbors and represents the voice of many people who usually do not attend meetings, but care and want their voices heard. The letter will be emailed to the directors this evening, and I have a hard copy for the general manager. The letter reads as follows. Dear KPPCSD Board Directors, we, the undersigned, support exploring the option of forming partnerships with neighboring police jurisdictions to improve public safety and limit Kensington's exposure to risk and unnecessary costs. The initiative ordinance passed by the 2009 board casts a long shadow over efforts to contract for police services and, according to one legal opinion, is likely invalid. The board needs to assert its authority to do the job for which it was elected. We therefore urge you to immediately instruct the district's council to seek judicial relief. Thus clarifying your rightful power to enter into contracts for police services. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, members of the board and members of the audience. My name is Rochelle Nason. I'm the mayor of Albany. You're downhill a little to the south. But I'm here in my role as a member of the Alta Bates Task Force. Mayor Jesse Arreguín of Berkeley has assembled elected officials, officials from the University of California at Berkeley, folks from various organizations and efforts who are concerned about the impacts that the pending closure of Alta Bates is going to have. As you may know, the UC Berkeley has done a study on the impacts of health in our communities, and it's really quite alarming. And some of these issues certainly will be of concern in Kensington. In particular, the added time to access emergency services and the impact on emergency preparedness and our ability to respond with healthcare in case of an earthquake. So I wanted to come here to introduce myself, to offer information and offer dialogue. If people are involved in learning more about this issue or being active on it. The task force is working right now to get an effort going to educate people, to help people learn. We'd like to get the word out about the health impact assessment, also about a study that was done by the Petrus Center about healthcare costs and consolidation. We have extraordinarily high medical charges in this area, and the lack of healthcare options is intimately tied to the very troubling pricing of healthcare service in our area. So again, I really just came to introduce myself, to invite you and encourage you to reach out if you have an interest in the work of the task force, and if you have an interest in reaching out to the Kensington community so people understand what the implications are and what our options are as a community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Hi, my name is Chris Whitman. I'm a longtime resident of Kensington, and I sent an email to the board members, it was Tuesday night, and I'm sorry for the run-on sentences, I just wanted to introduce myself and ask, I have a copy of the email here, just ask that it be included in the minutes so that others may have a chance to look at it.
We don't do correspondence or any kind of
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Pat Gillette. I have two things to ask. One, I would really think that the community would be interested in knowing what process the board intends to follow once the RFP responses come in, assuming there are any. The board's been remarkably silent on that, and so if you could tell us exactly what the process will be, whether there is going to be a vote, for example, in accordance with the law, and also whether you intend to hold them in public meetings. I think that there's a lot of community interest in this issue, and so giving some information to the public so they can actually make plans and decisions would be helpful, and I think part of our democratic process. So hopefully all of you will support that idea and perhaps let us know at this meeting or another one, or in some way so that people can make plans. Secondly, I would like to know if any RFP responses have come in. I don't think that's secret. So it would be nice to know you without identifying whether there have been any, who the responses are necessarily from, whether we've gotten any responses. Because again, I think that's an interest, of great interest to the public, and I don't think it's private information. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Okay. And I forgot to take roll, so I'm going to take roll right now. Director Madavi?
Here.
Director Deputy?
Here.
Director Sherrill
Here.
And Vice President Desai?
Here.
Thank you. All right, now we have the consent calendar and minutes from 3 meetings. I'm sorry. We now have the consent calendar and there's minutes from 3 meetings. Are there any comments on the consent calendar?
I do.
Okay.
So I'm just going to be clear that I'm going to reject these minutes on the ground that I stand very firm that how they are being conducted, where the president of the board is writing the minutes herself, even when said person voted and this board voted to implement a policy where they reaffirm the function of the minutes as a staff function. As you all remember, policy 4140.1, in which the duty to keep minutes, the general manager or his or her designee shall keep minutes of all regular and special meetings of the board. So I'm just curious, is the general manager now designating you to be the minute taker?
That's how it's done right now.
Wait, no, I'm asking, has he designated you?
That is correct.
So you are fine with this conflict of interest? Yes, it is a board member writing about their own, essentially their own process. And, you know, there is no excuse for a board member to be doing this since it takes so little time and the minutes have been so eviscerated into these action minutes. In other words, you are managing upwards, you know, by telling the board what they should be doing.
Any other comments?
Yes, I would like to clarify a couple points on first, the first draft. It's listed as August 8th, and I'm sorry, in the agenda it's listed as of the minutes of August
It
13th.
should be August 13th.
So please change that. And then the word roles, second paragraph from the end, should be the, yes. In the second set of minutes from August 15th, which should be changed to August 15th, sorry, I would like the inclusion of A and please. Notes. And the same on the September 5th, just A and, just so that.
That's fine. Okay, any other comments? I'm going to move that these minutes are adopted as corrected by Director Sheriff Watt.
I'll second that.
Okay. Director Madati? Director Duffy? Director Sheriff Watt?
Yes.
And Vice President Hasai?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to go to General Manager comments.
Thank you, President Tolley. I wanted to first note that in response to the question about have we received any responses to the RFP, as of today, we have received no responses. I also wanted to update the board on two items. The administrative recruitments are in the process of being completed, and we hope to have final interviews and selections at the beginning of October. And then on the community center progress report, the project seems to be at this point in time on track and on schedule.
You first.
Thank you. May I ask a question? Several community members have approached me about how they would get in contact, or they know folks who they thought would be a positive addition to the staff, and I'm wondering who they should be put in touch with.
They should be in contact with the recruiter, Coffin Associates.
Okay, Coffin Associates. All right.
Brandon Romo.
All right. Thank you very much.
My turn? So while we're on the topic of administration, so I was wondering, at this point, all functions of the district administrator have been successfully transferred over to the new temporary person?
Not all functions.
Specifically?
The payment of accounts payable and the mail and office management at the front counter.
Okay, and then this person has also completed a background check appropriate for working in a police department environment.
Yes.
All right, so there is a DOJ live scan form that's been added to his personnel file.
They don't keep a personnel file for temporaries, but yes, there has been a live scan completed.
Okay.
Tony, I've got a couple questions. Last meeting, at least I expressed my desire to have the PPP manual done, at least on the agenda for this month. It's not, obviously. Can we have it on the next meeting? We can get a commitment that we can get the next meeting, have a reading of it?
I think the next section that we're going through is section 1000, which governs the workings of the board and the process for meetings. And it goes through 3 levels of review, and it's at the 3rd level, and we hope to get it on hopefully at the next meeting in October.
And what's left after that? I'm sorry, what's left after that?
2,000, which is all the financial.
And when will that be done?
We should have it by the end of the year.
End of the year?
We have it in draft form. It just needs some minor changes.
There's no way we can get that next meeting? I just want to get this done.
It's possible, but it's going to be difficult to get in October.
All right, well, I can't speak for the board. Personally, I'd like to get this completed. The other question I have is, in our existing PP manual, the new, I think it's 3,000 or 4,000, there's a form that employees have to sign, 3,000 acknowledging the terms and conditions. Have all our employees signed this form?
I don't believe they have yet.
Is there a reason? I mean, it's been, what, 3 months or so?
It's something we need to complete.
It seems like it'd be a good idea to get that complete. Thank you.
Wait, about the policy manual, I should point out that you have capped out on using Sloan and Sakai for any more work on that. Just so you know, we're also over budget on it, but yeah.
That's correct. Hello, everyone. I just want to make a report on a couple of things. The first thing I would like to report on is the recruitment. I'm still engaged in recruitment to fill the empty police officer positions, and to date, I have 2 individuals in background, and last week I received 4 applications. So I will be moving forward in the process with those. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge Rodney Martinez for the extraordinary job that he did with the transition from the Richmond Dispatch Center into the Albany Dispatch Center. When we started that project, I didn't expect it would take so many years for some of these things to get complete. However, it was out of my control. But when we started this project, it was Rodney and we looked at the 5 individuals that comprised a working team with the Albany Police Department, and unknown number of people that worked in the background. So for the Kensington side, it was just Rodney and I have to acknowledge Rodney for the extraordinary job and commitment that I witnessed through this entire process. I don't want to get into the details, but I saw his frustrations and I saw his patience get tried, and through it all, he continued to push through. I would say that he was indispensable, and I don't know how successful we would have been had he not been involved and working with me on this project. So I just wanted to publicly make this announcement, and I will be submitting a document for the backup to the board.
And Officer Martinez generally works a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift, and we told him as much as we'd like to have him, we appreciate that. Probably doesn't want to stay around, even though we're acknowledging his tremendous effort on this project. The next item is the public safety building update, and I'm going to give my mic to Director.
Actually, board comments.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, so I have been for the last 90 days working on trying to get access to non-confidential consultant bills, and finally, after 90 days, after hitting every possible barrier and playing every unnecessary and inappropriate waiting game you can imagine as a director, even as a resident, I managed to essentially finally get my hands on them. And just to give a quick rundown of what I've been essentially struggling with for 90 days, that has involved having over 7 emails ignored by the general manager regarding having this item fulfilled, essentially running into the fact that these files are not being filed into the district's archives for some reason, and that even confidential administrative staff only had inappropriately redacted summary sheets. A lot of that is attached in said packet. And then essentially having to say this in public session and having not much happen as a result of that, being forced to contact the firm directly, and then saying the general manager had the forms, and then finally, as a director who is empowered with the ability of oversight and the responsibility to do so, having to make a Public Records Act request as a citizen, weeding through case law. And really, that is really what your directors are now being reduced to if they are not in the favor of whoever the president or the general manager. But really, moving on to what's in the bills, some things that struck me, and I guess like when we talk about this district being a prudent spender or not, I should point out that for that April 2018, or so April 28, 2018 town hall, the district effectively spent over $2,000 having Bob Dice moderate that event. So instead of having staff do it, you, the taxpayer, shelled out $2,000 for that 2-hour effort. On top of it, we have consultants apparently doing staff tasks, which seem to be everything from developing talking points for a staff report, and then commenting on strategies for the board to adopt its own policy manual, and then also drafting agenda reports and board resolutions. This is not counting the fact that you have a consultant producing the budget, everything from drafting, preparing, revising, finalizing, printing and delivering, and updating. And that was over 40 hours of a single consultant's time, who is being paid $205 per hour. And in the back of your package, you have essentially the Chief of Police General Manager job expectations and the General Manager duties claimed by the board. So, I mean, clearly that is not what was happening. And then beyond that, there's some interesting things about Bob Dice's involvement in the district, but, you know, I consider those smaller fish.
So I just have a fixed attachment.
Oh, sorry, there's a full one, I did it every other for directors, because it was like a tree thing, and
So I'm
also...
not in favor.
No, it was just, I just randomly did every other. But then, the last item, I really feel necessary to state that this behavior of blocking or slowing my access to public documents continues. Right now I'm essentially having to fight this battle where I'm being pointedly refused or being deflected on access to clarifying public records around why a non-staff person was using a district credit card. Additionally, the district has, is currently in violation of the simplest statutes of the Public Records Act, which is after 10 days they're supposed to give you a response and tell you when they will provide you documents in a good faith estimate. And that's really what a board of directors who's been elected to, oversee the people's finances is facing. I'm done.
Yes, that will move on.
Public safety update, now you can find.
Is that working? Sort of. I'll use it. That's better. Okay. I was at the meeting last night. Well, I should sort of preface it. Rochelle and I have been working with Larry and Dawn to find a solution to the public safety building renovation. Can we fit both boards, or both departments, I should say. And we've been meeting, I guess, once a month. And before I go into what happened last night, at least my notes on the meeting last night, I should preface that with Rochelle and I met Larry and Dawn on the 8th, and the reason I'm talking about this a lot.
Excuse me, just for folks who are new or don't know who Larry and Dawn are, Larry and Dawn,
Sorry.
it's okay, are directors of the Kensington Fire Protection District. So there are some folks in the room who are new to the meetings and may not know everybody.
And Larry and Dawn are the two people in the fire board tasked with the renovation and plans and things like that. So Rochelle and I have been meeting with Larry and Dawn. On the 8th, we met with them to discuss again the public safety building. And at that point, the building in the park had pretty much been decided that it wasn't going to happen. So the focus was on what can they do with the existing building. And we left the meeting, Rochelle, if you have any comments, please chime in. We left the meeting assuming, or at least with the understanding, that they were waiting to hear from the architect about what the minimum space required was for ADA and seismic upgrades, because the building does need ADA and seismic code upgrades. And once they determined that, then we were going to discuss if and how it would be possible to put both boards, both departments in the building. The next thing we heard was that they had met with the architects. They had mapped out a program, and there was no room for the police. So with that background, I think Rochelle went to the next board meeting and had some discussions. And it was, I think, nothing was really decided. So I went to the meeting last night for the fire board. And the architect was there. And just, I was assuming everybody knows this stuff, but probably people don't, everybody doesn't know everything. Due to an earthquake fault behind the public safety building, it's been determined that they can't increase the footprint, they really can't even add another room. very restrictive about what they can do with the building. So they have to renovate and do any upgrades within the footprint and the existing space. So they're pretty hamstrung with what they can do. So the architect was there last night explaining the current plan, which only includes the fire district, but he explained the reasoning behind it. So he went and looked at a couple of scenarios for both police and fire. And one scenario would be, I guess you could call the nice to have scenario for both departments, what would really be great to have, and what the square footage with that entail. And then what would it take just to have a best practices space for the police and the fire. And just the best practices combined was going to be larger than the square footage that they had to work with. So the next thing we looked at was, well, could we get the fire department with best practices in the square footage? And they determined that yes, they could probably make it fit, and that was his design that he proposed. And he went through the whole process. There's a lot of detail, and so it was pretty thorough with the presentation. Now, of course, that means that there's no space for us, and so I asked a couple questions. One of them was, did he look at possibly combining the two departments, maybe less than best practices, maybe not a suboptimal solution, but try to find a way to make it fit? He had not looked at that. The fire board had not asked him to do that. They asked him if he looked into, if he knew, could they get a variance? Given that it's such a critical building, even though it's near earthquake fault, would it be possible to possibly get a variance from the county so they could extend the footprint? He didn't think they could, but he said it depended on the individual person at the desk at the county. I then asked, well, would maybe a supervisor help with that process, and he didn't really know. So I don't know if that's been explored or not. And then finally, I asked the fire board, would it be possible for us to give them our minimum requirements, because they were working with, I believe, 2000, maybe 15 data, maybe 17 data that Kevin Hart had given them. It wasn't really data that would say, well, if we need only this, it was data about we'd like to have this, and this would be really up to the standard. So I asked, could we come up with what our minimum, absolute minimum space would be, in the hopes that possibly try to find a compromise, try to find a way that no one gets everything they want, no one gets everything close what they want, but we could somehow fit the two boards, the two departments, in the building. You didn't say no, they wouldn't hear it, but I didn't get any sense of enthusiasm for that option. My read on it, and obviously there's some board members here that might have some more opinions, is that the plan to have the building house only the fire department is really the only plan they're seriously considering, which of course is their building, it's their right to do that. And it's the fire district oversees the building, let's put it that way. So, while we could, we have to discuss that if it even makes sense. But I didn't get the sense that that was really unfeasible or something that was be seriously considered. So I think we have to deal with the fact that there's not space for us in that building, and then we have to find alternate solutions.
So where are we going forward? I think Director Debbie and myself have assumed that we're going to take a two-pronged approach. The first, of course, is to continue our dialogue with the Kensington Fire Protection District, because we always want to work in the interest of community. So we will continue to talk to them as their project develops, and share the information that we discover, and hopefully they will be sharing with us any information they have more changes in their program. You can see, I put a few copies in the back last night as part of their agenda packet. They included some plans prepared by their architect, which shows the existing building, and then potential plans for the renovated building that houses only fire. The other prong that Director Deppie and myself, of course, will be exploring is where we put the administration and police services. within Kensington. I'm working off the caveat that, of course, we're still looking for and are adamant about establishing space within Kensington. We're not going outside the district. We are here. And we want to provide the best space available for both our employees and our residents. So we will be in discussion. We'll bring some items up before the board at the first October meeting. We had looked to hold a community forum, but unfortunately, space is very tight in Kensington right now because of the renovation of the community center. This building is completely booked up in November, and when we figured that we would have information, I know the fire board will be holding a community meeting, I believe November 16th, is that correct? Here, they have an open house of the public safety building on Saturday, November 2nd, so you want to keep those in mind. I approached the Unitarian Church for some dates in November and was unable to get space then. So we will continue to see where we can find a space where we can meet with community members. Because of holidays and because of restrictions, unfortunately, it may get pushed out into January, which is not ideally what we wanted, but I don't think any of us have a living room large enough to hold a community meeting. So unfortunately, we'll see what we can do, and we'll keep everyone informed on the website and through social media. So, but we will bring solutions to you. We're actively working on them. We're meeting regularly. So please do not be concerned. We actually have some very positive, I feel, ideas and solutions. Sometimes when you run into these problems, creativity actually can expose some really new ways to be and to grow. So we welcome your comments, but please, for now, temper your concern, because I promise this is first and foremost on our mind, and we take it very seriously.
Is there any knowledge on timing? Because I heard at one point that Vice President Dahmer was expecting to break ground in March of 2020.
I don't think there's still, well, they passed a resolution to get an estimate for the current building, and they need that because if the renovation costs exceed 50% of the value of the building, then they also run afoul of a bunch of, basically now they're having to adhere to code and they're too close to the fault. So they need to get an estimate for the current design. They'll also have to get an appraisal for the building. But that's as far as they would go. I think that there was a proposal to flesh out some of the design work, and that was deferred. I think they're going to wait until the community meeting to go further with the design, because that's my understanding. There is one other item that they're planning on that sort of affects us, and they'd like to put the temporary fire department in the building right across here, the church's parking lot. Now, that parking lot is co-owned by us and the church, and there's no really hard dividing line. So, depending on their configuration and where they expect the engines to go out, it might require some coordination with us, given that there's people parking there, kids running around and everything. So, even though if it's just a church parking lot that's between the fire district and the church, I think it will affect us and will probably require some coordination.
I think it's most effective if we consider the March 1st as a deadline for now, if it changes, but it keeps us active and busy in moving this project forward.
So I was at the meeting when you spoke, Rochelle. I was wondering, so you mentioned that we had some ideas already on the table. I was wondering, would you be willing to tell the full board what those ideas are?
Absolutely, when I present all the ideas together. It's not agendized tonight.
It is. We're having a public safety building discussion.
It does not behoove the district, I think, to offer solutions that are half completed or when we haven't fully fleshed out assumptions and followed through.
I mean, you were very comfortable offering your house if it came to that.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was sarcastic.
No, at the meeting you did. You said,
Yes.
if it comes to that, I will give them my house.
Well, that was a statement made, I'm sorry, I should have.
And it's recorded.
Yes, it is. I said, because it seemed to me that let me explain. During the fire board meeting in August, thank you, after the finding by Director Dover in conversation with the architects, had only come up that afternoon that we would no longer be part of the renovation project. The police board would no longer be part of the renovation project. So it was rather last minute. He sent me kindly an email to let me know. And then I'd come, the board themselves, the fire board themselves that evening were finding out for the first time that the police department and administration would probably not be part of the project going forward. They had some discussion, at which time a few board members, I felt, started to get very concerned about what was going to happen to the police department. And I wanted to assure everyone that we would actively work on this project, that I had no concern about finding a home for the police department because it would become my #1 priority. And excuse me, it's a little bit dry here. And that to impart my seriousness, I said, if necessary, that I would
So
house the
are you
police
being
department.
serious in that offer? No, you're saying to impart my seriousness, I made this
To
statement.
impart my seriousness, it's a figure of speech, and I'm sorry, I just, it wasn't really sarcasm, I'm sorry. All right, English majors, what part of speech was I doing? It's
What was your enthusiasm?
enthusiasm, and I was attempting, thank you, hyperbole, yes. So it was an attempt to show that this is, I am adamant and enthusiastic about finding a suitable solution for this problem.
Well, I mean, this is not too much of a shock in that the fire board has been warning for a long time this was a likely possibility, and this was sort of their last run attempt to say, well, you know, we can try to do this given what we've been boxed into. But they have been saying I think it's actually been a running theme for years once they found that fault, that there might not be room for both of us. It was very clear, it will cause a lot of concern, and so I don't think this board should be in the least bit shocked that we're at this position. And so,
Well, actually, the week before, Director Domer had told Director Debbie and myself that he felt that there absolutely would be room in the building for us. So it was a bit of a twist, but, you know.
and we didn't prepare for the worst case eventuality.
Oh, no, we're always prepared. That's why I told you I had solutions in
So
mind. and
would
was
you
ready.
be willing to share with the board, because this is now a major board community issue?
Oh, absolutely, and I will be sharing all of those in depth with the board as part of a full presentation.
When? Could we have a date so we can start
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm referring back to the point where I told you that I tried to get this building for a date in November, was unable to get any date in November. Tried the Unitarian Church for several dates in November, was unable to get those dates. Therefore, I'm still looking for a space.
But you can still present to the board, like you can still bring a mini version of that presentation to all of us
absolutely,
so we can discuss.
But at the time, Director Debbie and myself felt that the best idea was to do a board meeting presentation and then a community presentation in conjunction, very close together, so that we could really get the full benefit of people's input.
So instead of putting the collective thought power of the board on this problem, you want to retain this as a two-person committee problem.
No, what I want to do is to have thoroughly looked at solutions and not do anything sort of halfway. I think it's confusing to folks when we present kind of a half idea that we haven't fleshed out and examined, and then people say, well, what about X? They come back and then we say, well, we've discarded that. And now we're on to Y. What we want to do is very clearly lay out X, Y, Z, A, B, C, soup to nuts, and show the community, this is what we looked at, and the board, this is what we looked at, here's why we're recommending maybe these two possible solutions. Please give us your input, have we missed anything? Because you can see that we've done the work. So we want to be very thorough.
I'm wondering, is any of the other board curious?
I I actually would like to say that one of the things I appreciated about the community center project, which I only came to a couple of years ago, was the groundwork and the process by which Rachel, when she took over the Parks Committee, had laid the groundwork for the project. And so I think it is a very wise idea. This is a compressed timeline anyway, in the sense that this information came out a month, like less than a month ago, about a month ago. We have more information as of last night's meeting, and I don't think it's too much to ask to give the two board members who are making up the subcommittee or that are handling this a few weeks or months to come up with thoroughly examined solutions. I actually don't want to waste time on sort of half ideas. I want the time put into this to research it. So I support waiting a bit. We understand it's urgent, but there are multiple options for us to consider, or there will be, and it's better to have them thoroughly fleshed out.
The other thing is there's a lot of moving parts, and until some of those settle, we don't really know timing or anything else. So I think it makes most sense to me to let Directors Debbie and Sheriff Watt continue to explore options before presenting anything publicly.
I'd like to point something out about that community center project. It was promised at 1 million, it's currently at 2 million and likely to go over, and that, this is sort of like, this is now a crisis condition in a way, that the police need a building. The department needs that. This is not, well, we can take our time on it. The fire board has indicated they have, their own pressing things, and that this board has dragged their feet for a very long time. It's in the fire board minutes that they're sitting around waiting for this board to act or to tell them something. And so yet again, you're almost prescribing that we're going to go into the same situation again, even though we're now saying we might have a hard deadline when they're going to make solid decisions where there's no point of return.
First correction, the community center is not going to 2 million. It's currently budgeted for 1.7, and we appear, knock on wood and fingers crossed, we appear to be just fine, thank you, on budget and on time. And we have a 15% contingency within that budget, so if we don't spend that money, we'll actually become 15% underneath that. The second point is, this is not a crisis nor an emergency. Yes, the fire board has been working on this issue for a long time. They came to me in 2015 in the fall and said, and the board, and said, we've discovered we've got these problems, we would like to go forward. We had they kindly included this board, the then chief of police, and in fact, then subsequently the next two chiefs of police after that, with their conversations with their architect asking for perspective. They drew some plans. That work continued. Upon assuming the presidency in January of 2016, I had conversations with that board and said very clearly, we have some very pressing problems on this side. Our police board, we really actually need to focus on those, and I'm sorry, I don't know that we have the energy and the time right now and the income to focus on the public safety building. They said they understood, and we then took some other actions, making substantial changes to our budget, splitting the GM and chief of police position, recruiting for that position, and making the changes that we have made over the last 3 years. So then they held a meeting in July 24th, 2017, in which they presented predominantly two ideas, one for renovation upon the building at 217, the other for a new building in Kensington Park. That new building was estimated between $10 and $12 million. And they got from that meeting, they had quite a strong public reaction that was not favorable, I would say overall. And I think there was some surprise at that. They haven't understood that there would be such community concern. So they kind of stepped back for a while and then looked at the renovation of the building as it existed. They did some more seismic discovered that there were these trace faults, and continued the conversation. There was an election, changes in their board, and they've continued, and we've continued the conversation. So I don't think that, they have been tolerant of our timeline, but they were also very understanding that we had some serious issues of structure that we were looking at.
How long
So-
does it take to get a bond attorney's opinion? They were waiting for us to ask for an attorney's opinion.
Well, we had that conversation publicly, and the board voted no to do that. And so I think that we will continue to present information and have conversation with the board. But there's no emergency. We're taking this seriously and going forward, and we're able to focus on it. And in light of, we're still not completely determined about where we are in terms of our certain things with our structure. So we're answering those questions with information, and then as soon as we can make a prudent and careful decision, we will do so.
I also like to point out the RFP stated there was a building. So now you're essentially taking that off the RFP too, is what you're suggesting might happen. The request for proposal for police services that sent out, it stated that they would have the option of having access to, building space in Kensington.
That was accurate at the time.
And then I believe that they will always have building space in Kensington, because we have said that we would need to have building space in Kensington. There's never been presented the option that we would not have space for the police department in Kensington. That has never been my assumption.
So can we make this a recurring agenda item every meeting so we will get updated by the board and we can discuss it as a board?
Yes, that's what we promised at the last meeting. And that when I announced that Director Duffy or myself would be at every fire board meeting, and that we would continue to invite them and have this, and I just a few moments ago said that there would be items for discussion on the first meeting in October, which is our next meeting. I understand.
Because you also missed out part of the fire board meeting where they essentially shot down your response time analysis request, and they essentially bluntly said it's completely unnecessary because that has been done, and anyone who has a ruler or Google Maps can figure that out for themselves.
That was not a request from this district.
Yeah, you said it was in the letter.
This is also not an agenda item. The public safety building is on the agenda.
Well, no,
So I'd like to stick to it, please.
It refers to the public safety building, because you were saying that you cannot go forward with this until you have those response time analysis. This came from our discussion of engaging with the Kensington Fire District over the public safety building.
There were people that, once the fire district had a thought of putting a new building in a new location, it raised the issue of other locations. And at our meeting, several residents identified different locations that were, in their minds, possibilities.
I present to you the 1997 cut-right opinion which includes a response time analysis done by then Fire Chief.
Oh, that's wonderful. I wish they had mentioned it.
They did. They mentioned it at the meeting, and it actually was posted on Nextdoor for a long time.
Well, folks don't always see things on social media. And what happened is that Director Dahmer informed Director Duffy and myself at the meeting, that the ad hoc meeting in August, that he was wanting to go make a decision on a location for a new fire board based on, only based on response times, not based on whether it was parkland or anything but response times, to which Director Duffy and myself replied, fine, that's wonderful. And then their board had a discussion about whether they should authorize payment of the August 11th meeting, about whether they should, or get past the 10th, about whether they should authorize someone to have, I think it was a $60,000 study time motion study, and then it was determined that Google Maps, and a stopwatch would be kind of equally efficient. But Director Debbie and myself have never been overly concerned. We're always working in conjunction with the Fire Protection District, because the ultimate point of the location of any building is safety for residents. Is that anybody in trouble can be reached within minutes, because we know that how valuable that is.
Okay, I'd like to open this up to public comments.
Oh, so sorry.
It really bothers me to hear a board member saying that we are not concerned about this, and following it with saying that we don't have the time and energy right now. Does that mean that we are looking at another consultant to figure out where we are going to put the police department?
I'm sorry, I never said I was not concerned. I said...
You certainly did. You said there is no concern. You
No,
didn't say you were
no, I
concerned.
said...
You said there is no concern right now. And then you followed it by saying that right now the board doesn't have the time and energy. So my question is just simple.
No,
Are you
that
going
was
to hire a consultant, or you're going to do it?
I'm sorry, that was in 2016. I was
That was
giving
no
a
time and
timeline.
energy and
In 2016, the board did not have the
so you're
time.
talking about a different board not having
I'm
time and
talking
energy.
about well, we had certainly had time and energy, but it was not the time or place to put that energy into, we were not able to put that because we also didn't have the funds.
So are you saying that you have the time and energy now?
Of course we do.
Okay.
Yes. Director
I just want to make
Davis
sure that
outlined
that goes
the
on
theme.
record. In lieu of taking your generous offer of moving the police to your house, which I was sitting in
That's
the
not
audience.
sarcasm.
Excuse me, well, I don't know your sense of humor or your sarcasm. I was sitting in the audience, and I really thought you meant to open your living room for the police. But prior to that, I recall that Director Becky identified several other sites at one point, talking about a reservoir. It was in a letter, you were asking, I believe it was a letter to the fire board, and you were asking
There
for
were
them.
residents that suggested various sites. One of them was the San Pablo filtration plant. Another one was the Summit Reservoir. Another one was the Unitarian Church. Another one was the triangular lot in El Cerrito, admittedly. These were suggestions from residents. They weren't suggestions.
I would just, it doesn't matter what side, you put it in writing, and those are very constructive. I'd like to add another site to that for your consideration. The dental office next to the gas station. That's a commercial building, so getting an eminent domain on a commercial building is much easier. Parking would not be difficult for the police there, either by renting space for 2 police cars from the gas station or using the little parklet that we have ourselves. And the only thing that would have to move is that bus stop that stops in front of the dental office. So I would like for you to consider that. It is central, it is very close to the...
No, it's 3 minutes. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Pat Gillette. So I'd like to tell you what concerns me. There are 2 things. One is that it seems like the fire board has made this a major focus. And you can see that's because it's their building, but I believe it's our building, the taxpayers of Kensington. We own the building. They've made it a high priority for the past several years to find a way to deal with the problems with the structure. What concerns me is that this board is taking what I would call a passive approach, waiting for the fire board to do analysis, waiting for the fire board to invite them in, waiting for the fire board to do this and that. And I don't think that should be your role. It's really important to the citizens of this community even if you eventually outsource our police, that we have a police presence in Kensington. So having this very lackadaisical approach to, well, we can't find a place to have a meeting, we can't, gee whiz, and maybe we'll take it up in October, seems really inconsistent with what I consider to be urgent. Urgent that we find a place to house our police. Another thing that concerns me is that we pretend that the fire district and the police district represent two separate bodies of people. They don't. They represent the people of Kensington. And we had to find a way to work with the fire board. And I know that they've reached out to you and made offers to jointly fund the building, to maybe have the fire board put up the money up front and then have Kensington Police lease it back. Why aren't those kinds of things being explored? And to say that you're going to have this secret that you keep until you blast it to the public seems sort of silly to me, because guess what? Rochelle did not plan the community center. That was planning by citizens of the people here in Kensington for years and years and years, who worked on the park and how to redo the community center, ultimately resulting in Measure L, which was rejected by the public. But the footwork was done by the people of Kensington. So why don't you open up this discussion to the people of Kensington? Form a committee like the park committee to think about sites. You had someone just now beating it up and suggest something that perhaps you hadn't thought about before. Why not engage the citizens instead of keeping this very closed and secret methodology that you use to decide issues that are of great importance to this community? So I would encourage you to, number one, treat this as urgent, to stop being passive about this and waiting for someone else to find a solution, and engage the community in this discussion actively and let them participate. We are supposedly one of the most intelligent communities in the country, given the making of our citizens, and yet we aren't going to take advantage of that. We're going to rely on 2 board members to come up with a solution. I think we should look elsewhere and try to expand the people who have input in this for the benefit of everyone.
Thank you. One thing I want to make perfectly clear is whether the board contracts at all for police. Clearly that's not known at this point, but in addition, everyone wants police presence in Kensington. We certainly don't want a little desk at McDonald's, and so we will be looking for having the police present in Kensington no matter what.
I did want to mention that Measure L actually was very informative, I think, with our reluctance to promise the building in 2015, 2016. We had seen that Measure L failed so soundly, and that we felt that there was not the appetite for a bond measure to fund a $10+ million building with the community members. So we held off marching firmly forward with that plan. The renovation of the community center, just real quick, the Measure L, that with all due respect, we have a new architect, we have a structural engineering report, we have an ADA report, which were not done previously with the work done for Measure L. It was a completely different project.
That was what I was referring to. It was not that the contributions were not valuable before and after, but it was the methodical way in which we got expertise around the structural, around the ADA requirements, and had a process that was, I thought, just laid the groundwork that just was iterative and built upon the knowledge of as we figured out what was possible, what was necessary, working with constraints. That's all I meant by that.
Yes, I want to ask the question of what sense would it make to locate the fire department building and then the police service building on an active earthquake fault? That doesn't make sense to me. If the fire department building is a given, is located where it is on the Arlington, which is an active earthquake area, why would we want to, if we're going to do a new building, put it like someplace like the dentist office which is again on the earthquake fault. It makes no sense. If we're going to do a new building, we would move it out of that area, which means somewhere south of probably a quarter of a mile from the fault, if we're going to do a new building. Thank you.
Hi, Gail Feldman. I'm here representing KPOA again. Somehow I got the job back. No, David Spath is out of town. So first I just want to say that I unfortunately wasn't able to make it to the fire board meeting, so Dave imparted some of his knowledge about it, but very minimal. So I may make some statements based on the fact that I wasn't there, so people can correct me. But first I wanted to say that KPOA has sent 2 letters to both boards related to this subject matter. And the first one goes to process. And I think some other people have spoken to that, but it's not specifically what we recommended. Again, over a year ago, probably a year and a half ago, we suggested that the 2 boards set up a 2x2 committee, meaning what you set up, but you don't have it as a public meeting, meaning we don't get to participate, we don't get to hear the process that you're using. My guess is, had that been more public, some of this discussion you're having tonight and some of the, what I would say is some distrust, might not be there, because you would have been having these public meetings where, you know, they're more, perhaps a little less formal than this, but they're still public meetings and they have to be disclosed to the public with your agendas in advance. So basically, you know, you've been blindsided somewhat by the fire board, and perhaps not by the board members themselves, but by their architect about what was going to happen with this building or what the possibility was with this building. And so it's leaving everybody in the community feeling like there's not a transparent process. And certainly that's how KPOA is feeling about it. So again, I would suggest that, you know, there's no time like now to reestablish yourself as a public meeting, as a Brown Act meeting, meaning you formally have agendas with the fire board members, the 2 of you, Chris and Rochelle, and meet with Larry and Don in a public way and discuss these issues. It doesn't mean you can't do your research, you know, and present it when you're ready, but it would make, I think, a lot of people in the community feel a lot better, plus there'd be more chance for people to give their input. And again, as was said, the park project was successful partly because in that case you had a community committee. I'm not suggesting that. But you did have a public process that people could participate in, come to meetings as the project was going along, and I think made a lot of people feel more comfortable. So that's one thing. The second is that we did send a letter to you more recently in August asking that you find a way to get, we asked the fire board, and we're encouraging your board, to find a way to keep the police and the public safety going. And that seemed like the most optimal solution, given that you have the same issues about finding another appropriate piece of property, especially if the park is not part of that. So again, I would strongly recommend that that be the working relationship with the fire board to go forward. And I understand there are fire board members who do want to look at that option. I just picked up the plan that the architect, what am I saying? The plan that the architect has proposed, and I would just say that there's a lot of things on the first floor that I'm not sure why you would really need that as the fire district. They have a training room, for instance. I mean, there's probably a training room in El Cerrito, and since these are El Cerrito personnel, those kinds of things, and I'm sure fire board members are aware, would look at those. But again, please look at this plan and really be skeptical about why it is the police are being asked to be moved out. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we can't speak to the, of course, the architectural drawings, but we were in process of planning several community meetings together with the fire board when we were informed by Director Dahmer that we were no longer to be part of the building. So we were beginning our series of open and public meetings.
You wanted to bow, you said that the police board should bow out at that meeting, saying that you didn't see any point of us being involved anymore.
Well, once they told us that we would not be in the building, yes, we said, we figured that it would be more prudent to hold our own meeting once they had told us that we would not be part of the project.
Yeah, I would like to say, I go to the fire board meetings regularly, and it's my own perception that the fire board has simply reached the limit of its patience in dealing with this board. That the characterization that this board is passive, I think, is generous. I think it's been a lot less than passive. They're moving ahead now with some energy to solve this problem. And they have sort of split it into two problems. So one is the old public safety building is going to have to be empty if it's going to be renovated, and something has to be done with the fire department in the meantime. And so they've tackled this, and they're working on a solution to put it in the parking lot, as you heard this evening, which is, I'm amazed that this can be done. We're talking about living quarters for 2 or 3 men. We're talking about equipment. We're talking about a fire truck, and utilities, and everything that goes with having a fire station, a temporary fire station, over in the parking lot. Okay, that's the temporary portion of the problem. Tonight we've been discussing that long range. What do we do long range with the fire, with the police department, and where do we put them? You've got 2 problems on your hands here. They are going to empty that building very short range. So when you come back to us with your ideas, I want ideas not just on where you think the permanent solution is, but what you plan to do with the police in the next, after the start of the new year.
I'm sorry, maybe you missed the point where I said that we're presuming the March 1st deadline, that we will be housing the police from that moment forward. I hope that they find a wonderful temporary location. Director Masai and myself recently were informed by the church that construction trucks for the community center were unable to sit on that parcel of land because it's not reinforced. So it may be a considerable project to put temporary housing, unfortunately, on the parking lot in the church library parking lot.
We'll take one more comment,
I was at the fire board meeting last night, and I think it needs to be said that several of the fire board directors made it very clear, and I think almost exactly quoted, proceeding with the renovation without the police department was not their first choice. Their first choice was to explore suitable alternate locations for a new building, and the leading candidate is the corner of Kensington Park lands, although not really, practically speaking, part of the park. It's overgrown with trees and is adjacent to the library, fronting on Arlington Avenue. It would be a big project, and there's no guarantee that that would even be available because seismic work needs to be done. That fact was brought to this board's attention months ago, and we've been dithering around about bond opinions and such. The bonds have been paid off. The bond is dead. There is no more bond. So any idea that somehow the bond indenture forbids utilization of a portion of the parkland for this purpose seems to me highly questionable. Anyway, I think in fairness to all concerned, it should be made clear to anybody who's interested in knowing that the fire board is not eager to run the police out of the public safety building. They'd rather have it in a better building, and right now it looks to me like the ball is in your court, at least as far as that corner of the park is concerned.
I have a quick conclusion, I don't have to close. I have never, and nor I feel anyone on this board has ever stated that we have felt that the fire board has sought to run us out of the building. That is wrong characterization and completely unfair. The other question, the bond measure has been something, or the bond status has been a question that we've had. Our lawyer could probably speak to that, but perhaps we're moving forward another time. Actually, my primary concern and hesitancy, personally, as a board member, never was the bond, it was the cost. 10 to $12 million was stated. I need some verification, but I understand, I got some new information recently this week that would put those costs at least $2 million higher. And the 10 to $12 million estimate was June 2017.
I'd like to point out one thing about the costs. Since you're sitting on land that we quote-unquote own, again, who really owns it is the people, and even in the government code, the point that the government serves the people. But the point being is that land has values, which is deferrable to your contribution to the costs. Further, the point of a long-term lease is that you don't need to front the money, is that essentially you agree you will be sitting in this building with a lease, and that you're essentially paying off your part that way.
Yes, but the fire board, past fire board members have told me that perhaps I should have gotten information updated, that the idea that they would be able to afford a building in north of $10 million at that time did not seem possible.
And the other thing is,
And
the other thing is, as I was told by Jean Drummond, she and her husband and another geologist had done trenching the park, and they came across an apparent fault right below the tennis courts, which is also an issue. And her point to me was, it's just like the California School of the Deaf going from the Hayward Fault in Berkeley to the Hayward Fault in Fremont. What do you gain?
Well, if it's farther than 50 feet, then it becomes actually less of a problem.
This is the fourth time you've told that story, and it's a canard. I have to tell you, Gene and Wyatt Durham are not
Please get up and
geologists.
show us the decorum we would show you at your meeting to stand up and speak at the mic, please.
Good evening. I've been attending a fire board meetings for many years, and what has happened is the pace with which the fire board is dealing on the remodel has changed very dramatically over the last year or so. I am not sure that we on the police side are aware how that pace has changed. The second thing is, I don't see how a remodel can be done that includes the police department without the general manager being involved in it. I mean, you would have to have staff person involved in it, and you can't go by things that Hart said a couple of years ago. We need to be aware of what we want. The final thing that I'm going to say, that the remodel and the place for the police department is not only an issue for the police board and the police department, it's also an issue for the fire department and the fire board, because clearly they are not going to start a remodel without there being a place for the police department. I don't see how this community would settle for that. Thank you.
one very last comment, and that's it.
I just thought it might help to summarize where we started last night and where we ended. So we started, as you've mentioned, with the presentation from the architect of the floor plans that were published, and he talked about the limitations of the program, and I won't go into the details, but he did give us some examples of the current difficulties that exist in the police space right now. The fact that there are no holding cells for suspects, there's no victim witness room, there are problems with evidence storage and lockers and things, but a couple of them are actually legal problems that I suppose your district and ours for housing you could potentially be sued for if something went wrong. So I asked him if he could give just an off-the-cuff estimate of how much square footage would be required to correct just the deficiencies for the victim witness interview room and the holding cells. And he said about 300 to 500 square feet for the holding cells, and he recommended a live scan facility, and about 90 square feet for the victim witness room. One thing that we noted, Chris, when you made your comment, you asked whether there would be any possibility of re-engaging to find a place for the police. And I think one thing that maybe between your exchange and mine, we did kind of figure out that the architect might be using police data that included administration space as well as actual police service space. So it wasn't an agenda item for us necessarily, but with a sort of casual engagement, at least one or two of our board members invited that your board could execute an engagement with the architect to go through that with him, because he does have all the data from the previous interviews, which were pretty in-depth a couple of years ago. So you guys are welcome to actually do that. What we actually did was we said, you know, this might not be perfect. We still have some questions about the plan. We have some questions about if we have able-bodied personnel only on the second floor, why do we need the ADA renovations up there? So, you know, we need to do some iterating with him. He also said that it's not decided yet that by moving our district manager downstairs that we could avoid an elevator. We may still need to add an elevator to these plans. As Chris mentioned, we need to learn the cost of a potential renovation relative to the value of the building. So I think it's fair to say that we still have questions about this plan, this tentative floor plan, but we decided not to spend any more money on it. But our goal for the community meeting on November 16th is to present a very robust analysis of what this is going to look like, because we haven't actually voted to renovate. So we're going to take this plan and get a fairly rudimentary cost estimate. We voted to do that. We've also had very fruitful conversations with the church about using the parking lot, and it sounds to me like that's pretty much, you know, we're on a very positive trajectory there. One thing that we've told the church is that we'll leave it better than we found it, and so that's kind of appealing to them. But we are engaging a study of how that would be laid out so that we can get an estimate of how much that would cost. So our goal is to present to the community not a decision, but a very thorough analysis. I mean, we may very well find this is not a good investment for the community. We really don't know. Investing in a, 50-year-old building? It's a tricky prospect right there. So I just wanted to finish by saying thank you for coming last night, and I really appreciate your questions, Chris. And you guys, your board is welcome to initiate your own engagement with our architect. I think our board is fine with that, and you can use all the data that already exists. Obviously, the taxpayers paid for it. So just want to make sure that's clear.
Thank you.
Hello again. Just a point of clarification. There's been a lot of comment about what's critical for the department and what's not critical and what we need or must have. I would just like to say on a yearly basis, we are monitored by the Department of Justice. And they use both state standards and federal standards upon which they measure our department by, or excuse me, your department. And I just want to point a fact that we do meet standards predicated on those regulations that they measure us by. Our field officer comes by once a year and we do monthly reports to him. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to Bayview, and I know many people, I've gotten many emails from people on composting, and so we are working on an amendment to the contract, which would give an extension to Bayview's contract, and they would include composting. But perhaps more excitingly to a lot of people is instead of right now schlepping hazardous waste to Richmond, Bayview is working on some type of service where you can make an appointment to have your hazardous waste picked up by Bayview on some periodic basis. So that's, I think, the good news. And there was a very interesting piece on Fresh Air this afternoon by Professor O'Neill from Cal on waste. She just wrote a book on waste, and she talked quite a bit on the problems with plastics. And it is no doubt this is going to be leading to some change in the near future. So I don't know if anyone wants to, any board member wants to make a comment on Bayview, or if there's any public.
I just have a question about your timeline for presentation of board items. What are you thinking that?
Probably sometime in the new year. We have to work with the county as well. So it'll probably be sometime in the new year, and hopefully we'll have this in place by May 1st, which is kind of the next billing cycle for Bayview.
Okay. So I don't want to make any board member comment because it's not agendized as a, and nor is it a.
It's discussion.
It's discussion, but I'm not wanting to. It is also not an agenda. An item. We're not discussing the contract as it stands.
No.
So I'm just trying to get, I've been trying to get up to speed on all the organic and the trash, and so I'm just trying to make sure I have everything in place on this, that this is because of the January 2022 requirements, that is, the state is mandating all local agencies make, or like adjust to do such changes.
Well, yeah, it looks like we might be small enough to get an exemption under the draft regulations, but that's part of the impetus, and part of the impetus is the large number of residents that want food composting, and yeah, it's very popular with people. And I personally think it's a lot easier to have green waste going out each week rather than, gee, is this the second full week, is this the fourth full week? It's nice to just say, it's my garbage day.
And so I'm trying to understand, like, so my understanding is last time we opened this contract, we ran into a problem, or like, that's why I'm trying to just get up to speed on this, and I read some old minutes on this, but I was wondering.
I don't have a history, so I can't.
Because I swear like what happened is that Chuck Toombs, like they went to arbitration over the contract and it didn't end well. Like hopefully we can do better, but we have like sort of some plan in place for dealing with in case Bayview decides to swing arm on this.
I only know what the rumors are, I don't know the facts.
That was quite a while ago, and I will say that in 2014, November 2014, they passed an 8-year contract with Bayview. So that went forward with terms and conditions approved then.
The last thing was I'm just checking. So we're using Albany, El Cerrito, Berkeley, like those are our neighboring cities, and then Oakland and Piedmont is included. Isn't Piedmont quite far out? Is it under Bayview or is
Piedmont is in what you would think is in Oakland, but it's between they're next to Berkeley and Oakland.
And the thesis of all the data would be, I'm just curious, the thesis, like, we have all this data here, like the takeaway that the staff report or report by someone, I'm assuming it's you. What is the takeaway that we as the board should be taking from this?
Well, the takeaway is, I think that Bayview's rates are more or less in line with other jurisdictions. There have been reports in the past years that we pay the highest in Contra Costa County. That's not true. So it's just simply a sample. That's all.
Are there any other Contra Costa County? Because Berkeley's in Alameda County, right?
Right.
And so is Oakland.
Right.
Are there any other Contra Costa County providers we could compare?
Sure.
You're welcome to do that.
But there's a whole section of comparison of rates in Central Costa County, Contra Costa County.
Lafayette.
Yes.
I thought those are part of a different county.
No, they're
Oh, interesting. There's also mentioned as a trifold.
Dr. Duff?
Just one thing, could you clarify what the change in the green waste pickup would be? besides moving to once a week instead of twice a week? Is that the only change?
The state regulations, if they come into effect, would require the jurisdiction, or we would be the jurisdiction, to provide 3 containers and a gray, which they define as gray or black, a green and a blue. And there needed to be covered containers. The brand name that a lot of companies use is Cotter, and they have wheels. The green waste, again, under the draft regulations, you will be able, it seems, to have additional green waste that is not in a covered container. And that would continue, as far as I know, with the same practices that we have currently.
Because it does seem, in this community, well, I speak from personal experience, but there's a lot of places that do a lot of brush clearing.
Right.
And to keep it fire safe, I think to put any limit on green waste would be a big mistake. Any limit on how much green waste?
That's, we're in a high fire hazard area, and having unlimited green waste, and we're one of the few jurisdictions with that ability, and I think it's fantastic.
I'm sure you all remember the famous marshmallow experiment performed at Stanford in the 70s with 4- and 6-year-olds. Each child was isolated in a room and told, you can eat this marshmallow now, or if you wait until I get back, you can have another one. In 2018, the district did a similar experiment for enhancements of Bayview services. In Kensington, food composting had been discussed in 2009 during a district county committee meeting, and residents had been surveyed in 2014 prior to adoption of the current Bayview contract. But responses to a couple of multi-choice questions indicated that over 75% of residents were not interested in adding food composting as proposed. However, last year's survey was simplified to one question: when do you want for the service to begin? In 2019, with a small rate increase, or 2 to 3 years when it might cost more? About a third of respondents opted to wait, with the remainder going from the earlier time for a known cost. There was no way to say, I don't like marshmallows, other than to not respond. I believe the cost of garbage recycling service is important to most residents. The tables in tonight's packet overlook several salient issues. For example, all comparison rates already include food waste composting. So it might be more appropriate to add at least 7% to the Kensington rates for comparison. Also, backyard service in other areas includes pickup of recyclables and yard waste, not just garbage. And customers have a choice. I know I'm going over, but I've researched this a lot, and I don't think there are a lot more people who wish to speak, so I'd allow please to be continued. The central...
It's not fair to allow you to speak. Could you just summarize because we are limiting to 3 minutes.
Number one, the rates that were given, I think, are biased I have a report, but there's no way that it can be presented to the public. I would like to make one final comment. China's big crackdown is concluding its second year, and as stated in tonight's report, haulers are starting to not pick up or to charge customers for contaminated recyclables. The franchise fee requires Bayview to provide educational material about recycling and authorizes it to leave contamination notices. During the second quarter of this year, Bayview tagged for non-collection 3 times more containers than during the first quarter, going from 1 to 3. It appears that Kensington residents are recycling properly. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Anthony Knight, once again. The whole area of recycling, composting concerns me greatly. We are an outlier community in Kensington. We're surrounded by other communities that already have composting and kitchen scrap collecting. Every city around us has this. We are just dragging our feet. We have a horrific pollution of the ocean by plastic, an environmental concern that just should worry us all. And every time I'm served a plastic fork or given something to drink in a plastic cup or buy plastic packaging gets into my home, I'm wishing that there were laws. There are some that would turn this into compostable stuff, and that there would then be some bin that I could throw the compostable stuff into here. As I said earlier about the fire station, I think this board is really very passive on this. I know there is some activity. It's dreadfully slow. Something that disappointed me greatly was that with the last board, we actually had a solid waste subcommittee where residents could come and this could be discussed and this could be fed back to the board. This is now gone. We're relying on Eileen and Eileen alone to take care of this behind the scenes, and I don't see any really active leadership on this. Eileen, I'm glad you think that this is going to come into being by sometime early next year. I'm skeptical if you're in charge.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Hi, I'm Mary Hanley. I corresponded a little bit with you, Director Natali, and I would like to speak in favor of having green waste and kitchen scrap collection in Kensington. As Mr. Knight said, Kensington is an outlier. I've done quite a bit of research to see who will take my kitchen scraps, if there's a community garden or someone else who would like to compost. But I've been sending them home with friends in Oakland and Berkeley, which is not a great solution. So I would really like, I really appreciate your work in trying to get this to happen, but it sounds like, I'm a relatively new resident, I've only been here for 4 years, but it sounds like it's been a long-term project. So I do hope that your prediction is borne out, and I will try to hold you to that. I mean, my neighbors and I will try to hold you to that. It will start in March, May of next year.
That's what we
of
hope.
2020.
That's what we're hoping for.
Is there, and maybe you can address this after, I don't have anything else to say, but can you address what's going to happen, what's going to be the forcing mechanism for that? What's your incentive to make this happen besides your own personal?
We have to have agreement with Bayview, and General Manager Constantinos and I have been meeting monthly, and what we have to have is some time from our council, but our council is getting inundated with many requests, and that's the Reiki training stuff. To use a chemical term.
I don't believe that Baby was offered as a contract amendment yet, have they?
No, they have not offered us actually anything in writing, and then we also have to work with the county, both. And so we don't have any, we have discussion of possible terms, but we don't even have a term sheet yet.
I want to say that we're careful, I hope all the board members were careful about taking anecdotes and expressing them as policy or larger trends, but I will say personally, this is probably the issue in the community that I get the most support and the most abhorrence for, surprisingly enough. So I get a lot of folks coming up and saying, what are we doing about composting, when? And then I have folks who are very concerned that they're on a fixed income and that this will raise their garbage rate to the point that someone told me that she would throw her garbage on my lawn if we increased her garbage rates. So Director Tully has been working I've been very interested in this issue as well. I think the other board members are too, and we definitely want to move this forward, but we have to be very respectful of different viewpoints because we do know that this is personal.
Clarifying question, is there any kind of public timeline for your discussions with getting this amendment? This is a very opaque process, which I understand.
There will be a presentation of the contract to the board, and that'll be the time for discussion and support.
I guess that's my question. Is there a timeline for that?
Early next year. And as our council said, we have to have something from Bayview. We don't even have contract terms, but we're going to have to get an amendment from them and then proceed forward.
I guess I'm going to be a contrarian. I don't care a fig about food composting. Our biggest pollution is plastics, and food is so minor compared to our plastic issue. I think you're focused on the wrong part of our problem. If you have food scraps, you should be planning your meals better. You should be watching what food you're throwing out of your refrigerator, and I have to admit, I'm not innocent in that regard, but we do put a lot of stuff in it's a worm box, basically. But the plastics are the major issue, and we need to get laws to prohibit that in the myriad places it's used in the world. Thank you.
Could I just make a note that, as we've heard, there is a leverage point for citizens with Bayview, and so if folks are looking for an action, I would just suggest to respectfully encourage them to work closely with the district to implement, or at least to propose something around this issue. So just thinking about leverage points, Bayview needs to hear from folks perhaps as well.
To that point, if we want to work closely with the district, what does the subcommittee have? Like an actual citizen committee?
I think that General Manager Constantine and I are fine working with Bayview.
But doesn't that contradict the point of what Sylvia was saying, that if people want to get involved, they should be interactive?
My point is to put pressure on Bayview to come to the table and to move quickly. It's not about the terms or the conditions. That's left for the public discussion when there is something to discuss. But if Bayview needs a little push to get moved a little quicker, citizens can help do that.
At this point, we need Bayview also to look at what terms they're willing to do before we can negotiate that. So that's what we need. We need parameters.
Okay.
I'd just like to know, when is the contract up with Baker?
2023, November 2023.
I'm just following in the footsteps of a lot of people here who are not saying that there's no requirement.
but,
Okay, apparently there's not a requirement to say my name, it's all passed.
October 2023. It was an
Okay.
8-year contract passed in November of 2014.
Okay, so I object to the implication that the board has not been working on this issue and that they're very lackadaisical about it. This is not the board who set up that contract. That was for 8 years. So I'm not sure if Bayview even is under any legal obligation to change the contract. I mean, shaking your head no. So all we can hope is that if we contact Bayview ourselves, encourage the board to do so, we're stuck. It's not the board's fault. Thank you.
So I'm going to move on to the Kelly service contract, and I'll let General Manager Councilman Turris introduce it.
Yes, President Toy, this is a contract that just provides temporary services on an interim basis. We currently have a Kelly person, Mr. Rudy Karnayawan, who's working temporarily, probably for about a month, maybe a month and a half, total tenure until the administrative positions are filled. And I've gone ahead and signed the contract after it was reviewed by the General Counsel. It's presented to you tonight just so you're aware of it and also to approve it in case we need the services on an extended basis or need additional services at some future date.
Are you asking us for a blank check? How much money do you want to cap it at? You are asking us for a cap. What is your cap?
My cap is $5,000.
But that's your running limit anyway.
The question is, if you're asking us to approve additionally over $5,000, I agree that we should come up with a cap. I also have to say that unless I missed it, and it's possible I have, I could not find any rate information in the contract or the Appendix A. And I realize there might be, from what I read, there might be varying rates should there be varying employees that show up. But what is the current Kelly temp services person's rate?
45. It's $45.
Right, he said it's $45 an hour. So do you anticipate that you would be engaging, it's possible, in spite of the best intentions, that these positions are not filled by mid-October or the end of October, just knowing how long things often take. So is this gentleman not available after a certain time?
Well, what happens is that
Here.
Since they're temporary filling people, sometimes they do leave abruptly and just have to bring somebody else from the company. Right now, it looks like he will be available. And in response to your question, I'm not looking for a blank check, probably another $5,000 cap that in case it's needed would be appropriate for the board.
There's a lot of feedback.
I'll make a motion that we approve $5,000 for a possible extension of the agreement with Kelly Services.
When we were approving a maximum of 10,000, if we want, like, now we're approving 5,000, the motion is then 5,000. We need to be 10,000 max on this. Actually, that brings up another question. How much money so far out of that 5,000 cap you have has already been spent?
Well, I don't have an exact. He's been here about a week and a half. He works 4 hours a day. So he's worked 20 hours at.
He's not yet been paid.
He has.
Okay.
So his weekly, with the charge to Kelly would be 900 a week.
900 a week.
If it's 20 hours at $45 an hour.
That would be the weekly rate. He hasn't worked every single day. That would be the weekly rate. So that covers a little bit more than a month, $5,000.
When you say he hasn't been paid, we pay Kelly, and Kelly makes it, we don't control when he, yes.
So, just to recap, just to make sure I'm right, we're paying $45 per hour, which is a bit under the district administrator pay, but they're not filling all the functions of the district administrator. He's also so he's not fulfilling all the functions, and he's only working 4 hours a
It's
day.
working less, and we're also, you're not only, when you use a temporary service, of course, the bulk, a large part of the cost is to the temporary service for supplying you a qualified applicant. I'd like to admit, let me make my motion again. I move that we authorize $10,000, $5,000 beyond the district manager's authority for the approval of the agreement with Kelly Services to provide temporary office assistance. And the approval of the agreement with Kelly Services.
Would this include the appendix? This would include Appendix A with the hiring premium options. But that would still stick within the $10,000 to begin with.
Well, there is that exhibit, but there's a blank on that, so.
Well, that hasn't been signed.
Well, the hiring premium is a different, I'm sorry,
Exhibit A. It nearly didn't make it to your packet, though. Just a heads up. And I'm glad we got rid of that confidentiality element that this contract was only confidential within the district, for public record act reasons.
Okay. The pricing for the district hire, that I consider a different situation. When you hire from a temporary agency, there is a premium, and that is not part of my motion. Yes.
Okay.
I'll second your motion. Director Madavi?
Aye.
Director Debbie?
Aye.
Director Cheryl Swett?
Yes.
Vice President Isai?
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye as well, so it passes 5-0. And now we have the item that probably most people are so interested in, for those of you who are remaining, and that's the interim chief of police, the draft contract. I'll turn this over to our general manager.
So we do have a candidate that's been going through the background process, which is quite extensive. And I was notified today that, or actually yesterday, that he had completed the background process successfully, but I have not had an opportunity to review all sections of it. So there's some missing components and missing sign-offs, but basically he has completed the process, and we're asking that the board approve the agreement, the at-will agreement. We'll have to bring it back to you with the blanks filled in, starting dates and names. But I think I'm comfortable enough tonight to announce the name of the individual. And his name is Tom Phan, P-H-A-N. He's the former deputy chief of the city of Davis. And I would, if the public would allow us just some time here to complete the process, we will schedule an opportunity to meet the new chief and have an opportunity to interact with him. I put on the agenda setting a date for approving the final agreement and having a swearing-in ceremony for the next meeting, regular meeting for the board, which in this case isn't until October. So I would also, with the board's authorization, like to attempt to have a special meeting next week if we have the entire process completed, probably a week from today during the daytime. If the board approves of that in concept, we probably won't know if we can schedule that until early next week. So we'd have to post it on the website, so everybody should keep watching the website for time and place and more information. I think there's a good chance we can keep it for next Thursday and conduct that ceremony. I don't know the board's schedules, however, if you're all available to make it. So I'm throwing out that possibility.
What, was this to sign the final, or this was just a meet and greet?
Can we approve the contract at a special meeting?
Yeah, I thought the city of Bell.
Yeah, so, yeah, we can do both, if there's a quorum.
Okay, so city of Bell stuff only applies for compensation type increases.
Well,
I'm just checking.
Okay. I'm fine with a special meeting next Thursday, let's say individually, and I will make a motion that the KPPCSD approve this draft employment agreement at will interim chief of police. The understanding that the resolution will return to the board on October 10th, 2019.
I should just say,
Wait, I'm sorry, I have one quick question.
Oh, you're saying the final, the consideration, a resolution, we just can't do an ordinance at a special meeting, we can do a resolution. Okay, understand, or next Thursday.
Well, what you would do is let the general manager, authority to schedule a special meeting next Thursday. But if that isn't possible, then we would go ahead with the October 10th. And I would let you know early next week if we can do it next Thursday.
And so my motion reflects that. Should reflect that.
I will be gone next week, so it's only after the 10th.
What time? After 12 is good. After 12 is good.
Okay.
So the preferred time is after 12:30?
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Director Desai, Thursday?
I'll do my best. If you need me to be participating, I'm happy to do by phone for sure. And if I can be there in person, I will. And are you saying that you would also have a swearing in of the new chief at that point?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do my best. But I will certainly participate for the purpose of.
Well, we have a quorum if Director Nadavi and Director Sherswat and myself are there, so we would have a quorum at least.
Well, I'll still try to.
And then, and that would be great.
I just have one.
We have a period of time, so I think we should be a little hesitant about absolutely.
We may not have a room, but I can check with the fireside room to see. And
If necessary, we can do it at the public safety building.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to second my motion?
Yeah, so,
I had one quick question about the contract. I'm sorry, I just remember. For element section 6, item B, no amendment or modification of this agreement may be made except by a written agreement signed by the employee and the general manager and approved as formed by the KPPCSD General Counsel. That means that you could change the agreement after we've authorized the ordinance? Or like the authorize the contract?
Section B.
Section 6B.
6B.
So, this is boilerplate that came to us, however, I would say that the general manager can only approve an amendment that was within the scope of his financial power. Therefore, he would not be able to approve it if it would cost the district only $5,000.
I guess I mean beyond the financial elements, because adjusting the contract could be non-financial elements.
I understand, and the board could decide to impose additional limits on the power to amend or such others.
The general manager has authorization to make modifications. I mean, he oversees the chief of police. And so our approval is financial.
If I could
make one other point that it isn't immediately obvious. What this section actually says, and the reason I refer to it as boilerplate, is it basically means that you cannot amend this document except by a written amendment that's been signed off on by two officials.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that those two officials can approve any amendment that might enter into their heads. It simply means that if the amendment is to be valid, we would have to sign off on it. There are other conditions.
That it would still come back to the board if the contract was to change in some substantial way.
If it were to exceed the general manager's authority, as was just noted, the general manager does have a great deal of authority over supervising the chief of police. But if it were to go beyond his authority, and I can't think offhand of what that might look like, other than financial, if it were to go beyond that authority, then we'd have to come back to it.
Well, as long as legal, I mean,
Generally speaking, the board controls subordinate staff by controlling the general manager, which is to say, if you're displeased with what's going on lower down, you let the general manager know during the performance evaluation. But usually not
performance and evaluation.
That is the only time it's appropriate, so yes.
Well, this is required by PERS because of the 960 hourly. So there has to be a written agreement and it has to be approved by the board to comply with PERS retirement requirements.
Yeah,
that's the main purpose of this.
I understand approving the agreement, but I mean this section.
You're concerned about the possibility of the general counsel and general manager putting in a provision that would be unacceptable.
To the board.
Yeah, to the board, right. Our recourse to that would be to fire the general manager and fire the general counsel if it's something that's that problematic. Which is what has happened in the district.
I would also mention that, of course, this is an at-will contract. So if Tony and I were to lose our minds and put something in there that was inappropriate, the board would have the ability to terminate it in any event after terminating us.
I'm just checking. I go through dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Perfectly appropriate.
I have a question. I have a question, actually. My question is, why did you choose to make this an interim chief versus a chief?
We have not, the board has not really made a decision yet on the police department. If the board decides to keep the department, we would then fill it with a permanent position, recruit, fill it with a permanent position.
And in addition, he's a retiree, which means he's limited by hours.
And he could accept a permanent position, but he'd have to forego his annuitant status. I want to note, since you did ask the question, that one of the PERS requirements is that we recruit for the permanent position. So we are doing that, and the salary, as everybody else, is on the low end, so we aren't getting necessarily a lot of candidates coming through. So my recommendation would, I would come back to the board and make some adjustment to that if the board wanted to pursue filling it on a permanent basis.
So we have a motion, and it's been seconded. Director Madavi?
Aye.
Director Duffy?
Aye.
Director Sherrod?
She seconded it. Is there
Yes.
And Director Sy?
Yes.
All right, so with that, I think we're done for the night. Did you go? Pardon? Did you go?
I'll make a motion that the...
I think this clearly represents the conclusion in some ways of the tenure of interim chief Ricky Hall, and I want to give him So he has served the district well. He has stepped into the fray the day after Thanksgiving of 2016, when then Board President Len Welsh called me in the middle of Moana to say that our chief of police had walked out. And so I thank him deeply for his patience, his professionalism, and his goodwill and respect and interest in residents. So thank you very much. And you never have to come to one of these again, unless you're reported. I make a promise that I can. I'll make a motion to conclude this meeting, although I'll second the motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.